What a time to be alive. There are so many scope options with so many features and so many price points and so many different numbers. Generally, it's actually overwhelming. You can go all the way down to like a Diamondback Tactical, all the way up to a 946 Takara and beyond, and the prices just keep increasing. But what do you actually get for it? For a long range or PRS shooter, the scope is arguably one of the most important factors, if not the most important, in your gear setup. So it's good to know what you need to be looking at when purchasing a scope for that type of setup. So how do you know what to buy? Well, we've done a video on this before, the 4 core things that I look for in a PRS focused and also a bit of long range scope. They are first focal plane, an MRAD adjustment and reticle, the turrets that are on there, and the reticle itself. I still think these are 4 key areas that you should be looking at when buying a scope for this use. Let's open with focal planes. There are 2 key types of focal plane scopes. First focal plane has a reticle sitting in front of the magnification. So as you zoom, you'll also be zooming up on whatever's downrange as well as the reticle. In second focal plane, the reticle will be sitting back here before the magnification, so you will be zooming up only on what's downrange and the reticle will stay the same. You'll notice on a first focal plane that as you zoom through, the reticle graduations will actually stay true the whole way through. It's like they're locked to what's downrange. So if you've got to mark every 1 milradian, it will always be 1 milradian, whether you're on 5 power or 25 power. Whereas on a second focal plane scope, as you zoom through, it won't adjust that. It'll just stay visually the same, but there'll be more or less information in between the graduations. This means that the graduation marks on your reticle are only true at 1 magnification. Anything outside of that, you need to do a calculation to adjust for it. Why first focal plane in the PRS world? Well, because we use our reticles a lot. We are always using them for windage, regularly using them for drop. You want that reticle to be true no matter what. We do change magnification. Depending on the stage, we may be set out for something that's really close and want it out to 10 power. We might be shooting a bit further away and bump it up to 12, 16, 18. Every shooter does that differently. The key thing is if your reticle is true no matter what magnification you're on, you can rely on it and use that to adjust for drop and adjust for wind. First focal plane is really important in PRS. Now I mentioned MRAD as well, and MRAD is one of the languages you can use for the angular measurement that you're going to adjust your scope with. Now, MOA, MRAD, neither's better or worse. They're 2 different ways to measure the same thing. The reason I suggest MRAD for particularly PRS shooting, but works well in long range shooting, is that that is the language of the sport. So other shooters on the line will be talking in MRAD and they'll be talking about 0.5 to the right or whatever the call may be. They'll be using that terminology. If you rock up with an MOA scope, that can be a little bit difficult to translate what that means for your setup. So keep it simple for yourself. Run the same language that the other shooters are doing. That way you're going to understand what they're talking about. You will notice that all the scopes in front of me have turrets that are big, large and dialable. So you can grab them, dial and away you go. Some of them are locking turrets, some of them aren't. We'll cover that later. Some of the windage ones are covered, some of them are exposed. The big thing is the elevation turret, having exposed elevation turret that you can dial easily. If you're not using reticle for elevation, you'll be using your adjustment here for it. So it's great to have good quality clicks and a good dialing turret. Having the ability to use the reticle or the turret and make the decision based on the stage that you encounter is super useful for PRS. The last one of those 4 is reticle, and reticle is very much personal preference, but more and more now the favored options are the Christmas tree style reticles. Even more important now is that ability as you move further down the graduations on the vertical part of the crosshair, the ability to hold wind as well at sort of any stage along there. That's why Christmas tree reticles are so popular. This little scope here is the Diamondback Tactical, relatively inexpensive scope, a really good starting point for getting into PRS long range. On the last video we did about the 4 fundamentals of PRS scopes, one of the things that was most commented, and I agree, is a 0 stop. This one here doesn't have a 0 stop, and it's the big thing that's lacking for it. And pretty much any scope's going to allow you to reset your 0, where you'll dial it to wherever you are 0, at say 100 meters, undo it, grab the turret, put it back on at the 0 point, so that your 100 meter 0 will look like that. The difference for a 0 stop means that at that point it will stop. You see here that I could actually dial and keep going down and potentially lose track of which rotation I'm on. It looks like a 0, looks like back at 100, but I'm actually quite a ways out. A zero stop prevents that from happening. So if I was to add a fifth option into the fundamentals and we were able to spend a little bit more money, the ability for a zero stop type scope would be definitely a first preference. So you can wind that back down to wherever your 0 point is and it will not go any further. It's a really comforting piece. You can finish a particular stage and then wind it back till it clicks and you know that you're good to go for the next one. Now zero stop is a pretty common feature. There is the Vortex Venom there that sits under $1,000 Australian, the Falcon, the Arken SH4, the zero stop Veggies. All of these ones have a zero stop plus those other 4 features we talked about. We're all sub $1,000 Australian. So a whole stack of these here cost a lot more than that. Why? There are a whole stack of reasons, and the further we get into it, the more options we have. Let's take these 2 scopes for example. This is a Nightforce SHV, this is the Arken EP5. They're both a step up in glass quality from the ones that we were looking at. They both have zero stop. They also have illuminated reticles. That may be a feature you're after, it may not be. One of the big differences you'll notice is the tube size. This one here is a 30mm, this one is a 34mm. Now you may be familiar with a 1-inch tube. There are 35mm tubes, there are 36, 40mm and a range of sizes. 30mm tubes and 34s have become pretty standard. Now you may be looking at these two and thinking, oh well the 34 is far superior than the 30 because it's bigger. It makes sense, right? That may be true. The question is why? A lot of people look at it, think it's bigger, lets more light through. That is not necessarily the truth. There are some manufacturers that will choose to use that larger tube to transmit more light from the front to the back. In the PRS world, there's more of a trend to use the larger tube for more internal elevation, and as a byproduct, a bit more windage as well. Whereas a 30mm tube might stop at around 20-23 MRAD of adjustment, a 34mm tube might give you 30 plus MRAD of adjustment internally. It's quite a big difference. 34mm tubes aren't necessarily the be-all end-all, but there is a trend to go with that or larger. Now we find ourselves in the middle of this row here, and we have ourselves a 15 to 55 magnification scope. Seems a lot, doesn't it? Now this isn't sitting at the most expensive end, and you'll commonly see a lot of PRS shooters don't run scopes this high, and there's a reason for it. At 55 power on a Nightforce competition scope, you have a very narrow field of view. If you're on an F-class or bench rest range where your gun is rock solid in position, you also likely have a number of wind flags or other devices giving you wind readings, particularly downrange. You may even have someone else calling your wind for you. Given that, you can pretty much look through the scope and focus purely on your target to get the best shot off you can. For shooting PRS, pretty much all the information you're going to get is going to come through your scope. You won't have a row of wind flags downrange. You won't have other wind devices kicking about that show you what's happening downrange. And you definitely won't have someone in your ear telling you to hold left or right for your wind. So it is far more common for PRS shooters and also field long-range shooters to use a lower magnification. Commonly you see a 5 to 25, now some of them are starting to get up to that higher mark of 35 and 40. They still keep the lower end of the magnification in the single digits. It's amazing how many times you might have to wind back to 8 power or 9 power or even lower sometimes because the targets are getting close or the mirage is really bad. That ability to be able to take it down lower and also bump it up a reasonable amount is very useful. Generally we're shooting steel, not paper, so you're not necessarily worried about where that bullet hole is. As we start creeping beyond that $1,000 to $2,000 Australian range, we keep going up, we have more features and options for us to choose from. So for example, if you're setting up something very compact, a 5 to 25 from EOTech, the Voodoo, very capable long-range scope with a Tremor 3 reticle, but it is tiny. Compared to what is also quite a small scope, a 2.5 to 20 from Nightforce NX8, it is tiny, but you pay for it. And so if that's an important feature to you, the size of the scope to be quite small, that's where your money's going. You might choose something like the XTR3 where you've got a capped windage so you don't bump that, and you've got the ability to swap out to one of these dialable turrets that you can also draw on. Raise it, draw again, put your data on there, away you go. Or a little bit more money, get the same thing, but with a quick release version of it. Take your cap off like that. Another feature of this next one up here in the Burris line is a quick zero stop set. There's no tools involved in needing to set that one up. Something like the ATAC R has a capped windage as well. This type of capped windage is actually quite a useful exposed turret. You can even get a beauty ring that sits on those threads to protect them if you want to run it like that. Again, options, features, start paying good money for it. You might even pay some more money to get one in a different color. These ones here are the exact same scope and the exact same setup. The only difference is this one here's got a Tremor reticle. You pay more for that. and something like the Zeiss, which has really big numbers, which are nice and easy to see there, particularly good if your eyes are going, as well as a huge amount of internal elevation. It's probably got the most out of all of the scopes here. So there's a lot of features and reasons as to why the price keeps going up on scopes and why you can spend a lot of money on there. There's features and options. There's also an element of brand and after-sales service and how well they look after you down the track. There's also one big elephant in the room on all this stuff that I haven't mentioned yet, but you guys know what it is. It's the quality of the glass. You look at a Diamondback Tactical, you look at a Nightforce ATEC, there is a mammoth difference in the quality of the glass. The resolution that you see down range, the ability to see nice, crisp, defined images. You see a better result in some of this stuff here, and some of these are better than others, even at the same price point. Some will offer more features, perhaps not put the money into glass so much. Some will go the other way around, a little bit more basic scope, but really impeccable glass. So tell me in the comments, what do you count as the most important things to look for when buying a PRS or a long range scope? Do you agree with me? Do you have other ones you want to throw into the mix? Also throw in the comments the scope you're running or the one that you're hoping to get one day. We've only got a small selection of what is actually available out in the market. We are so lucky to have so many options, and it almost becomes challenging to decide which one to get. Guys, thanks for watching. We've got a podcast on the Impact Dynamics podcast channel coming out soon. We'll go even more in depth into optics and what we choose and why we choose it and what else is around there. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video. Oh, you notice that all the turrets in front of me have scopes attached. Is my microphone turned on? Oh, it is. Yeah. I didn't turn it on, you must have. So, sorry. Now I've got to put all these back.
Hang on, thumbnail.
Oh, yeah.
Thumbnail.